Good evening, everyone. What a great turnout we have this evening on behalf of our City Council and residents of Mississauga. I want to welcome you to Noel Ryan Auditorium to the inaugural Mayor's Youth Speaker Series. I hope you find it very informative. So we have about 200 of you registered tonight for the very first as we kick off this new Speaker Series program. We have some notable people in the room that I'd like to introduce. First, I have two councillors with me tonight. Councillor Jim Tovey from Ward 1. Councillor Ron Starr from Ward 6. School Trustee Noka Daru. And also Trustee Robert Crocker. Thank you. But tonight is going to be about all of you, thoughtful, smart, articulate, compassionate, and dynamic youth. So let me tell you why tonight is so important. Back in 2014, I made a commitment that we're seeing through tonight. It was a commitment to address some of the challenges the youth are facing. What I saw in my campaign was that we had 14% youth unemployment in Mississauga, and we thought, what can we do? What can we do to address these issues? And some of you provided some feedback that a speaker series on inspiring people would help motivate you, and perhaps they could share some secrets of their success and success for, in Amanda's case, people she's interviewed and how they became successful. We're hoping that through the networking and the connections you might make tonight, connections to possible mentors, they'll open some doors to you as you transition into the workforce. But before we continue, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Amanda and tonight how it's going to unfold. I'm going to introduce Amanda. She's going to speak for a little while, for about half an hour. Then I'm going to ask her some questions, and then we're going to open up the floor to all of you to ask questions. So that's how it's going to unfold. So as an accomplished business journalist who's interviewed successful entrepreneurs, business executives, and world leaders, Amanda's in a unique position to provide both insight on both her own success and on the success of others. Tonight, all of you will hear her keynote session with her and have the opportunity to ask questions as you prepare to enter the workforce. So Amanda is an award-winning journalist who's covered business in North America for over 20 years. Amanda is in the works to produce and anchor 2 weekly shows for Bloomberg Television Canada, which is about to be launched early in 2016. As you know, Amanda was CBC's senior business correspondent, reporting for its flagship nightly news program, The National, and the host of The Exchange with Amanda Lang, and there was that other guy for a while too, a daily business program airing on CBC. Amanda studied architecture at the University of Manitoba before becoming a journalist. Her first job in journalism was for the Globe and Mail, and subsequently she joined the Financial Post newspaper, where she became the New York correspondent. And in New York, she made the leap to television, where she first was part of a team that launched BNN, and before long she wound up at CNN as a reporter and an anchor. And she returned into Canada, we're so delighted about that, in 2002 to rejoin BNN, and has been with CBC since 2009. She has a best-selling book called The Power of Why, which explores the connection between curiosity and success. And tonight, we're going to be raffling off 3 copies, and she's promised to autograph them to you if you are successful. She's currently working on a second book for HarperCollins to be published late fall of 2016. So please give her a big round of applause. May I introduce Amanda Lang.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Mayor. Any questions? I think this is an important event because engaging, obviously, with people who are thinking about the world in a different way, which is what young people do by definition and nature, is important. It's important for people in politics and in senior leadership of business to know what the next generation is thinking. And it's also a really challenging time out there. As you know, we face some economic challenges in this country. Some of them are not unique, some of them are cyclical, some of them are unique and structural and important that we actually address them. And you're right in the kind of epicenter of that storm, those of you who are starting out your careers. So it is up to Canadians to actually do something very un-Canadian, and that is stick our heads out and stick our necks out and take risks and gamble things and take chances. And we need people who are willing to do that. You know, when I lived in New York for a while, I like to tell a joke about Canadians that went, how do you get 40 Canadians out of a swimming pool? You say, please get out of the swimming pool. Because we are by nature and culture a polite bunch, we're well-meaning, we do the right thing. But the time for doing the right thing is past. The time now is to actually dare and take risks. So what does curiosity have to do with that? Well, asking questions is, of course, the way to problem solve. And we all know this, and we all, in fact, know, and there's plenty of research on it, that asking questions feels fun. It is its own reward. But as you may also know, it's been drummed out of us. By the time we reach even young adulthood, our propensity for curiosity is long gone. And there's amazing research on this. How do I know that everybody in this room is a natural-born innovator? Absolutely curious by nature? Because everybody in the room was once 2 years old. If you've ever spent time with a toddler, you know something about them, and that is that they ask questions for a living. Toddlers do it with an insatiable kind of appetite, and they're doing it because it's how their brains work, and they need to figure the world out. They have questions they need answers to. And there was some research a few years ago that I talk about in my book that caught my attention, which is it asked the question, if we're so insatiably curious when we're 2, it defines this stage of life, where did that go? Why does it disappear? And the depressing answer is, it's really trained out of us. Researchers there was a joint study, University of Hawaii and Michigan, asked the question, how do adults, mostly parents, but adult caregivers, respond to a toddler's curiosity? And a really depressing percentage of the time, their response to the toddler's why is some variation of get lost. I'm busy, ask your father, I'm cooking dinner. And when they were asked, why would you respond that way? It's because it's not that they don't care for this child or want to give it attention. It's that they saw the curiosity as a negative behavior, as attention-seeking, as a stalling tactic sometimes. They didn't see it for what it was, which was the natural flourishing of a mind growing, literally neurons connecting. And so they shut down the curiosity. So when we're 2, we learn from the people we care most about that curiosity is unpopular. It makes mommy mad. Daddy leaves the room. There's a story I love to tell about, I was running through an airport, and there was a family going the other way, mother, father, 2 kids. And they were harried the way you are when you travel with your children, inevitably. And I overheard the father say to his son, who looked to be about 6, because I know if I answer it, you'll only ask another one. And I laughed, as anybody with children would laugh. It's the laughter of recognition. But then I wanted to rush after them and stage an intervention. We need to let our kids stay curious. Instead, we shut them down, and then we send them to school. How's curiosity at school? How is it at your school? I can tell you that they've polled teachers, and they've asked them which are the students they dislike the most, and the answer is the disruptive ones. Guess what those kids are doing? And from there, we go on to work. Work is even worse. We've created these paradigms where asking questions is a disruption. It's an interruption. It's a challenge to authority. Now, it's easy to reclaim your natural curiosity. I wrote a whole book about it. I can give you an hour-long speech about it. It's important. Some of the research that is very telling is with young children who all scored 95% on creativity tests. We're all creative when we're little. And the number of questions they ask a day and the number of times they laugh. And there's a strong correlation. And then by the time they get to be about 10, you see it all start to decline. And by the time we're in our 40s, we ask 0 questions, we're hardly ever laughing, and our creativity has really dropped. So the connection between curiosity and personal happiness is also very strong. More important to me, which as a business reporter is what brought me there, is the importance of asking questions for the greater good, for problem solving, innovating, economic value. We can't actually create a new economy with jobs for our kids and grandkids if we don't ask tough questions. As I did this research, I discovered something really important. And that is, it isn't just asking any question. The power of why is a kind of a convenient title. You have to ask the right question. As we know, Einstein said it, the right question is more important than the answer. And one reason for that is we rush to answers. We were taught in grade school that getting an answer fast would be rewarded. And neurologically, we're actually wired for speed. We like to automate our thinking processes, and if we can get something quickly, if we can see it and put it in a bucket in our brain, we want to do that, and we want to do it fast. The problem is, of course, that the first answer may not be the best one, And once we have our answer, it's our answer. And we very rarely stop and say, did I ask the right question? You may ask yourself a question, and you get an answer. You like it, you have an answer. And then it doesn't quite fit. It didn't solve the problem the way you hoped it would. And instead of stopping and saying, what was the question I should have asked? I must have asked the wrong one. We wrestle with the answer. We try to make our answer fit instead of stopping and going back. And one big reason this is important, and I wanted to talk to you guys about it, is because the world is changing, and the speed of change is, of course, faster and faster. The internet was the new platform paradigm that allowed the pace of change to be what it is today. There are other new platform paradigms, by the way. I can't decide if the blockchain is the next big one or if mapping the genome. Maybe both. But these are game-changing things that will employ you. But you go back to, we remember when the internet was invented, not by a US politician, and we didn't know how it was going to change the game. What we do know now is the pace of change is faster than ever. And we also know that complexity is the world we live in. Why does that matter? There's a big difference between a problem that's complicated and a problem that's complex. And if we stay with complicated and our tendency to respond to those kinds of problems the way we think it's best, we don't have any shot at having a good chance at solving a complex problem. And I'm going to give you an example. One of the guys I worked a lot with, he coaches groups on innovative thinking, trying to help people learn how to ask questions to get better answers. And the way he does it is he asks everybody in a seminar to write down a personal problem. He likes it to be personal because we have a closer association and our kind of insights are stronger. And he wants it to be in a how-to format. How do I make my son behave better? How do I lose weight? That last one was an example from how do I make my son behave better was one I gave him, actually. And I could deconstruct it for you. There's really interesting things in that sentence. What he does is he looks at the sentence as you've written it, and he breaks it down into component pieces. Well, in my case, so it's actually an interesting example. If you want to try this, write down a personal problem. I literally wrote, how do I make my son behave better? And he started with the word make. The kid was 7 at the time. We spent some time on that. This man in a seminar that Claude remembers, his personal problem was, how do I lose weight? And so Claude looked at this and began working with him and got some more information. How much did he weigh? How much did he want to lose? What was his strategy? Had he ever lost weight before? And the man had, twice. He wanted to lose about 20 pounds. In the past, he'd once lost 30, and he'd once lost 18. As they worked on this problem, it became evident that the right question for this man to ask isn't, how do I lose weight? It's, how do I keep the weight off? Why do I regain weight? Now, the difference between those two questions is profound. How do I lose weight is a complicated question. It's linear in nature. There are experts you can seek for advice. Your own past experience will be your guide. And it's scientific. We like these kinds of questions. A 9-year-old knows the answer. You consume fewer calories than you expend, you will lose weight. Why do I regain weight? That's an example of a complex question. Complex questions have characteristics like they're deeply personal. Your own past experience may be completely irrelevant to what's happening this time. There are very few experts to guide you. And the first answer you get might not be the right one. And by the way, there's probably multiple answers. So if we can't stop and say, what kind of problem am I grappling with? We really are going to mess up. Here's the tricky part. Parts of complex problems, like how do you reinvent an economy, which would be the problem that we're facing in Canada today. Parts of those big complex problems are complicated. They are linear. You can break a complex problem down into pieces, and you will find parts that are satisfyingly linear. Businesses do this all the time. But the problem is we solve the little part that we can get our hands around. We like that. We like having an easy answer to something. And then we ignore the fact that one of the other hallmarks of a complex problem is that once you've changed one part, everything else changes. There's an interconnected nature to complexity. And so that creates a bit of an issue. If we don't know that one of the things to do is to test our answers, we probably aren't going to get a good answer ourselves. I'm going to give you an example from my life about what happens when you don't ask questions. The mayor mentioned that I studied architecture. And for years, I was asked the question, architecture, now you're a journalist. That's weird. What was that about? And for years, I answered it exactly the same way. easy to remember because it was true. And that was, I decided I wanted to be an architect when I was 9, was on that path, got tons of reinforcement for that. People thought it was cute. My parents thought we were all lawyers in our family, and here's this little girl who was going to enter this male-dominated profession. That was nice. They bought me architecture books, and I was the architect. And then I went to school. And the thing that's great about architecture, when you study it, is that unlike a lot of things you study, you actually do it while you're training. Unlike the law, where you have to actually go out and practice before you know what it's all about. In architecture, 2/3 of the course is design. And it turns out when I got there, I wasn't very good at design. I, in fact, was mediocre at best. This was a painful thing to absorb for me, by the way. I'm one of those people who, if I want something, I work for it, and if it's not working, I work harder, and then I get it. In this case, you can't work harder at design. If you don't have talent in that area, it's not going to happen. It took me hindsight to see this, by the way. At the time, I got ulcers and migraines, and I didn't know what I was going to do. What I did was graduate with my bachelor's and apply for a master's, because more architecture was surely the answer. And then I had a personal, my elder sister died in the summer between these two things, and I took a year off. I was sort of thrown for a loop, took a year off, moved to Toronto. In that year, worked for the Globe and Mail in a temp job. It wasn't even a real journalism job. It was basically a secretary. Fell in love with journalism, never looked back. And the thing I always remember, and I would tell this part of the story too, is the first time I stayed up late working on a story, and a light bulb went off where I thought, this is how it feels to be learning something. I didn't know what I was doing. I was learning, but I had a shot at being good at it. I could feel like my skills were being used the way they could be used, and if I worked hard, I would get better. It felt good. Okay, so that's my story, all true. Well, then I meet a famous architect, and we become friends. And so we're having lunch one day, and he says, at this point I think I was 42, he says, what made you want to be an architect when you were 9? Now, in all of my years of saying I wanted to be an architect, nobody had ever asked me that. Not my parents, not a teacher. Nobody had ever said, what is it? Let's talk about what it is about architecture that you like. And I had come up with things in my head. I wanted to design airports. I thought JFK was the most beautiful airport in the world. But those weren't true answers. They were just good-seeming answers. So I said, well, it's funny. When I was 9, my hobby was to draw buildings. Instead of playing in a dollhouse, I drew buildings in plan view from above. And I like to draw one thing and make it another. So I would draw a barn but make it a school, or I would draw a church and make it a house. And then I would populate it with a family or characters, and I would tell their stories. So this is, the Smith house, and this is Jill's room, and next door is her brother Timmy, and they're having a fight. And I'm describing this hobby to this new friend. And I realized that never once in all the years that I drew these buildings did I draw the outside of them. I didn't actually care what the buildings looked like at all. I wasn't doing architecture. I was doing something an awful lot closer to journalism. I was telling people stories. And then, funnily enough, my very best friend, who's been friends with me since I was 11, when I had this big insight, she said, yeah, I always thought it was weird, because English was your best subject. And you always wrote short stories and poems. And I'm like, thanks for mentioning that before I went to school. One of the big takeaways for me about that whole process was how dumb luck can play a role in your life. Circumstances, in my case, a tragic circumstance, derailed me from my education. And that meant that I was freed. I had the time to step back and say, what is it about this that I'm not liking? And realize that what I wasn't liking was that I was ill-suited for it. So I've talked a lot to business groups and industry groups and middle-aged people. And this message is not that useful for middle-aged people, a lot of them. But it's a really good message for young people, and I'm passionate about it. And that is, if you're not doing something you love, if you don't love what you're doing, whatever it is, you must stop doing it. And the reason for that isn't because it's a kumbaya world and we should all be happy. The reason is, if you're not enjoying it, you're probably not good at it. So the lawyer you know who hates being a lawyer, they may be perfectly fine, but there's something else they could be doing that they would be great at. And we should find that thing. When we use our skills the way they're designed to, it's a joyous experience. We love it. We do have big challenges. I think the challenges we face are enormous, but I'm not in the camp that is pessimistic for young people. And that is because people that are digital natives, people that understand the world of connectivity in a very natural way, who can't even picture anything else, understand also the pace of change. So one of the hallmarks of functioning well in a complex world, which is where we are all now living and will live forevermore, there's two things I would say are important. One is accepting ambiguity. We do not like ambiguity. Now, I'm doing a lot of neuroscientific research for my second book, because it's around some of these very issues. And neuroscientists will tell you that our brains stopped evolving in any meaningful way in the agrarian age. And they were perfect for the agrarian age, and actually they worked pretty well up into the early industrial era. Our brains are wired for linearity, and they're basically giant sorting machines. Our brains take up a lot of energy. Fun fact, our digestive system takes up the most energy. And in the animal world, the bigger a creature's digestive system, the stupider it is. And for instance, after the advent of meat eating, and then again when we had tools to cut up the meat, we got smarter, because we had more energy freed up in our systems to use in our brains. But we're very stingy about how we use our brains, because we can't possibly absorb all incoming information, we can't possibly think about everything. If I had to sit here and think about how to stand or how to speak, I'd be incapacitated. I wouldn't be able to do anything else. If I took every sensory input that's coming my way right now, I would be a puddle on the floor. So we're very stingy. And the tricks we use to do this employ sorting and matching. When I get information, I want to match it to something I've seen or done in the past. I want to put it in that bucket. I want to move on. And the faster I do that, the more satisfied I am. In fact, neuroscientists actually use a term called knowingness. We want to know things, and it feels good. It feels good, it's state, it's an emotional state like sadness or happiness, knowingness. But we need to be wary of knowingness. So ambiguity is one of the most important things that we need to learn to embrace. The older we are, the harder this is. I think young people have a really good shot at accepting ambiguity. The idea of divergent thinking, that there's more than one possible answer to a question. And by the way, if you actually really want to make a kid think, make sure they ask if the question was right. Their teacher will hate them. But often it's not the right question. And by the way, the kids that really are unpopular at school are doing exactly that. They're not questioning the answer. They're saying, why don't we come at this whole thing differently? But ambiguity is the ticket to living with complexity. And then there's one other thing that I would add, and it's something that I've observed in great leaders in every walk of life. And when I say great leader, I mean, of course, political, business, but I mean people who just exhibit leadership strength in the arts, or it doesn't really matter, in this room. We all have the potential to lead every single moment of the day, right? I can lead to my kid in the morning or not. Great leaders have humility. And by that I don't, you say that and some people say, business leaders have humility? Politicians have humility? The ones that are truly great do. And what I mean by humility is a deep and profound sense that because there are more than one answers to a question, they're not necessarily right. And the really smart people are pretty sure there's somebody in the room smarter than they are. And they're okay with that. In fact, they'd like to meet them. I was at a financial conference not too long ago, and this portfolio manager was saying, super successful portfolio manager, and some of these guys and gals really do thrive on kind of confidence, because they're making big decisions and they can't second guess. He said every time he makes a trade, because every time you're buying something, somebody's selling it. And every time you're selling, there's some willing buyer, somebody on the other side of every trade. And he said every time he's making a trade, he pictures that the person on the other side is Warren Buffett. And he asks himself, am I smarter than Warren Buffett? Am I sure about this trade? It's a form of humility that allows him to stay very open to all the possible answers that are out there. So I'm not somebody who thinks that we need to feel gloomy about the future. I think there are real challenges in the jobs world right now for young people. I think we haven't actually matched up how we're training people, including at universities, for their eventual lives. But it's also not a dire situation. It could be a heck of a lot worse. You could sit around and wring your hands about our education system, and I would say, yeah, but which one do you want in the world? It's the same with our healthcare system, right? We can sit around and talk about what's wrong with it, but I think we can also be pretty proud of it. And the way that I think about things, it is important to accentuate the positive, especially when it comes to young people and what you're going to do, because I never feel more optimistic than when I'm thinking about the potential of the next generation. The people who are thinking and doing things I can't even really comprehend, but I know you will employ my son. So my message to you, if there is one, is stay as curious as you possibly can be. Don't, even if it's unpopular, let it be unpopular. There's a trick to asking questions in a way that doesn't offend. If you want to learn it, great. But your curiosity should also apply to yourself, not just to, why are things the way they are in the world around you, but why do you do things the way you do? What is it that you want? Stay open to why you're feeling the way you're feeling about what you're doing. If there are jobs that you've loved, if college pro painting was your favorite summer job, think about why that was. What were the elements of that job that thrilled you? I'm not saying you should go be a house painter, your mother will kill me. But there's something about that you need to think about and you can find somewhere else. Embrace ambiguity, accept complexity, and know that you're not always the smartest person in the room. And in fact, if you're not, you're in a pretty good room. So I just want to leave you with this one last thought. If at any point somebody said to you, please get out of the swimming pool, just ask why. Thank you.
Just testing that we're live. Are we live? Great. Well, thank you, Amanda. That was really worthwhile. I was taking some notes myself on knowingness and accepting ambiguity and always being humble, staying curious. Would you say that that was one of your key pieces of advice for people going forward? Is that what it would be? We have the leaders of today and tomorrow here among us, and I'm not gloomy looking out the room. I mean, when I look at the circumstances, how many people here are still looking for a job? Or are you all in school? Some of you are in school. Are you looking for a job? Is it a summer job? Put your hand up if it's a summer job. What about a full-time job? See, we have a lot of youth looking for full-time jobs, and whether they don't have enough experience, they don't have the right education, they face unpaid internships, they face contract employment, very precariously. It's very precarious out there. So we're going to try and dissect that a little bit, and I'm going to ask some questions, and then we're going to give you the opportunity to do the same. So if they're out there looking for work, Amanda, what would you say to them? What are some of those key pieces of advice you would give them?
So one piece of advice, and I'm not going to claim that it would be a wildly popular one, but it's to be open to all opportunities. There was a generation of people who graduated between, say, 1980 and 1990, maybe 1995, who went to school, got a job, and just rode up an escalator of success. If they didn't screw up royally, they got wealthier, they got promoted. Lawyers, doctors, bankers, you could just do this. And as we know now, a law degree is no guarantee of a job. The world has changed so much, the disruption that happens all the time. And we haven't even seen the amount of disruption that we will see in things like law and business and accounting. So those kind of classic safe jobs aren't there anymore. But the skills you acquire to train for them are really useful. And the services that those types of people provide are still going to be needed. So what I would say is stay open and flexible. And if you train as one thing, but you get an opportunity in something else, be open to doing it. Do something is my advice. When our grandparents, my grandparents, not yours, that would be me, when our grandparents were looking for work, they took whatever work was there. They didn't say, well, I have a PhD in cultural history and therefore I must. They said, I need a job, there's a job, I'm going to do it. And I think a little bit of that spirit needs to come back into how we think about things, because adaptability is the key. So take your skills. I'm by no means saying I want to see PhDs being busboys. But if the busboy job is the one that's available, that's the job you should take.
One of the most inspirational stories I read about this winter break was Kirsten Stewart's book.
Yeah.
It's called Our Turn. And what was really inspirational was that she was an English major like yourself and had a job lined up to be an editor. And because of the recession, it dried up.
So she didn't know what to do. So she pulled out the newspaper and she went through the want ads and she found Girl Friday. I mean, what's a Girl Friday?
Yep.
It's a jack of all trades is what it is. Basically admin assistant, you pick up where it needs it. Anyways, did that not lead to her to becoming president of that company?
Yeah.
Is that not incredible? I highly recommend this book. It's a great read, but that doesn't happen very often. And we have to look at education, and we have to look at experience, and as you say, you have to be adaptable and flexible to take whatever comes up. So what do you think is more important, education or experience?
So it's a tough one because I'm a massive believer in education. And if there's one thing I could do differently in life, it would be to do a broader degree. I had a very specialized degree, and so there's a lot of stuff I didn't learn at that age where you can just soak things up. Having said that, I think you can learn as you live. I think we can learn as we go. And for me, experience has been the most important kind of guide. And it's funny that Kirsten's story, in grade 9, I didn't want to take Latin. Do they still teach Latin?
Not too often.
You do need to take it if you're going to be a certain type of scientist, but for everybody else, I mean, really.
Right.
So to get out of Latin, I took typing. You probably don't take typing anymore, but we took typing.
You type with your thumbs today, I think.
But as a consequence, I got summer jobs as receptionists because I could type really fast. And when I moved to Toronto, I needed a job. I went to a headhunter, and I said, I need a job. And they put me at the Globe and Mail as a kind of a receptionist. And it was because they could say I typed, well, I don't even remember what, 60 words a minute or something, I forgot. And it was only there when you form the connections and meet the people, and people then, if they see that you're willing to work hard and are interested, it wasn't that people sort of said, I think you could be a good journalist. They could just see I was keen. I was interested and I was willing to try things and work hard. And people took big chances for me. And that's probably been your experience too. Mm-hmm. When I meet somebody who is willing to work hard and is open to possibility, I'll go way out of my way for that person, whether it's somebody who already works for me or somebody who doesn't, because it's a quality that's so admirable that people do want to help people who are ready to help themselves.
So we talk a lot about that and how you get a job, and we talk about your education and how specific it is. We talk about the value of mentorship and having that champion in your life, and we talk a lot about networking and getting out there and meeting people. I have to be honest with you, in my very first job, I leaned on my parents' networks. Yeah. My next door neighbor was a vice president of marketing at Campbell Soup, and I thought, this is good. He's going to get me into Campbell Soup. It's going to be great. And he said, I can't get you a job, but I know a few people, and I can open a door for you. I can get you a meeting.
Yep.
And through that meeting, through his ad agency, that opened the door for me. In my very first job, I was a proofread contracts, advertising contracts at an ad agency, and within 3 months I was a media buyer, and a year later I was on the account side. So it can happen. What about other stories of success? How do you define success?
Well, for me, success is very clearly if you're loving what you do. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't limit that to any activity. So, and I really do think, and it may not be possible to love what you do for a living in the sense that maybe you love something that doesn't pay and you actually need to pay your rent. That's a problem. But find a way to do the thing you love, and ideally find a way to do a job that incorporates it somewhere. So to me, that is the absolute key. I also happen to, as a journalist, it's a quality of journalism, but I think a lot of jobs incorporate this. If you can find a way to learn for a living, mm-hmm. if you can find, politicians do it, policymakers, there's lots of jobs where it's important for your everyday success to stay open to new ideas. And it really feeds the soul, right? The idea
lifelong learning.
Lifelong
mm-hmm.
learning.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's actually a quality that's...
But not everyone can do what they love. And often it doesn't pay very well. I know people who work with children, and one of the most gratifying things to nurture young minds, but it was also one of the lowest paying jobs. You can't always do what you love, and sometimes people just have to take a job because it's a paycheck. They don't have those kinds of opportunities. What do you have? No?
I think that's true. I do think... I think if you hate being a lawyer and you would love being a daycare worker,
should be a daycare worker.
Well, now obviously there's a financial reality, but can you live in a smaller place and be daycare worker? It's something to think about. If you can't, maybe you need to be, in a part of law that deals with children. Maybe maybe there's something. So to me, it's kind of a self-awareness. What is it that you like about what you like? Because too often we drift, and I was a prime example, we kind of drift along because the answers sound good and everybody's happy with it, instead of stopping and saying, well, what is it that I like about that? Right. And I've had to do this with journalism too, because it's a very unstable field, and at any time you can be fired by people who've decided you're too old or not good anymore or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I've had to stop and think, well, what do I want to do? If I'm not doing this, what is it? And it's really easy to isolate the things I love, right? I get to learn for a living. I get to sort of help people understand things sometimes, which is very gratifying in a very complex world. So if I go off TV, I want to find a way to keep doing that. I haven't quite nailed the job description, but those are the elements that I want.
It's very liberating to find out what you love to do and to be able to do it. My husband worked for Jimmy Pattison, the Canadian billionaire, lovely, lovely man. And there's a story in his autobiography that he routinely fired the bottom quintile. Yeah. And he said he was doing them a favor because they were obviously in the wrong line of work. And he was going to make them happy by allowing them to find work elsewhere. Now, there's a story for you. Okay, next question. You've interviewed many successful and influential business people. Are there some common traits or skills or qualities that they share?
So successful can be defined in different ways. There are those that I was describing before who I consider successful because they're wonderful leaders. And those ones have an ability to affect the behavior of people around them. Real leadership is creating good behaviors in others. And they have those qualities of openness, a willingness to consider other people's points of views, a willingness not to be the smartest in the room. Having said that, a lot of business leaders fit a slightly different stereotype. I call it CEO-itis, which is they have a hard time hearing any other point of view. They're used to hearing that they're right. And it can get them into a lot of trouble. Reed Hastings at Netflix actually tells a story himself that remember a few years ago, Netflix suddenly decided to up the price from $7.99 to $8.99? You may not recall this, but the stock fell 20% the next day. Wow. It was a disastrous PR move. And it transpired that internally, people had tried to talk him out of it. It was his thing, he was going to do it. And his team had said, Reed, this is stupid, don't do it. But they couldn't do it forcefully enough because he was such a genius and was always right that they didn't even trust themselves enough to actually call him on this. And he wasn't in the habit of hearing other people because he was a genius who was always right. And he said the big learning for him was he's not a genius who's always right. And he needed his team to be able to talk back. So there's that. Some leaders really do demonstrate sort of some of the pitfalls of it. Mm-hmm. The really great ones understand that they have that kind of sense of humility and they care about people.
And are they all A-type, very driven, very focused, or what have you found?
I think there's a big range. And again, I think you'll find a lot of people in the corner office have some of those qualities. Mm-hmm. But then you meet people, one of my favorite examples of great leadership is Ed Clark, who's just the outgone CEO of TD Bank. And Ed, he understood way before most of the big banks the importance of diversity. And for him, he didn't mean it as like a check the box, like a lot of businesses do. He understood it as your employee is a human being, an individual, and individuals are defined by things like who they love and where they're from, and they will be happier and more engaged if they feel seen, right? Seeing somebody for their individuality is a form of respect and love. And so he marched in the Gay Pride Parade at a time when it was unthinkable for a big bank to be anywhere near that. Now they're all there, of course. But this was years ago. And he wasn't trying to wave a flag. He was just saying, I want my employees to feel like they can be themselves, whatever that is. And so it was a very naturally driven, and he's the most sweet, humble guy you can meet. Mm-hmm. But it's stuff that when it comes from a place that's so good and sensible, great things can happen.
The banks actually have shown some leadership in recruiting diversity. And what they've seen is there's a positive impact on their ROI as a result.
For sure.
Banks or any board or any executive team that's more diverse tends to be more productive and tends to be more successful. Is that what your understanding is?
Absolutely. I mean, my view is it's less to do with your gender or your race or any of that. Those are kind of convenient categories. Mm-hmm. I think real diversity has to do with how people think.
Right.
And so style of thinking is important. And as the more diverse a group of people you can get in a room, the better off you are. The trap for me is, especially when it comes to gender equity, you can have a woman on a board or as a CEO who is just as much like the guy who would have got that job because she went to the private school in downtown Toronto and they went to the same tennis club, and that's not diversity. Just the fact that she's a woman doesn't, I don't think, this is totally politically incorrect. Diversity is somebody who had different experiences, whose brain has different inputs. So to me, we need to think of it that way.
For me, diversity is collision of ideas, different ideas that they bring to the table because of their background, because of who they are, and they're going to bring a different perspective into the room. So the more diversity means the more different perspectives you have, so you get more ideas all at the same time.
In fact, one of the fun things that I discovered dealing with companies who, when we collaborate with people, we often want to collaborate with the people closest to us. So if we want to brainstorm in business, we'll often grab the people we like. We grab our buddies, the ones we go to lunch with.
Right.
And that's a mistake. What you want to do is grab the people you find slightly irritating. Because you don't really understand how their brains work. And so their brains are working differently. And you'll get much better kind of idea generation and collaboration. It's hard to do because you find them irritating. But if you can see that irritation as just a different way of thinking about things and you don't match up, it can be really powerful.
So I think they want to hear as well the role of mentors and role models in their lives and how they can really use those to, to seek success.
I mean, I don't think you can really underestimate the power of people who will go out of their way for you. And, we were talking about this earlier. There is a two-tiered system. People whose father is the CEO of an investment bank have a better shot at getting a summer job there than somebody whose father is a small-town doctor. That's just the way it goes. So if you don't have natural kind of entree points, and then you got to prove yourself. I think doors get opened. I think it's very rare these days that anything else happens. But that's an important door. In my life, mentors have been massively important. I've had one mentor in particular who I stumbled across when I was a receptionist at the Globe, who gave me my first real job in journalism, who taught me to be a journalist, who later gave me my first real job in TV because he was doing something else at that point. And only did it, I think, because he could see I wanted to work hard and I was passionate about it, and he felt like giving somebody a break. I do think mentors will find you. They're out there and they'll find you. There is a bit of it's an interesting problem because you can't always find your mentor. They do sort of need to choose you. But you have to put yourself in their way. So there is a kind of a weird chicken and egg thing about it.
It's like getting discovered. They'll discover you if you're working really hard to get noticed.
Yeah.
And suddenly you start getting noticed and then promoted, and people start talking about you.
Yeah.
And they do. And then they find ways of giving you more opportunities.
Yes.
And it helps you along your way. So let's talk about journalism for a moment. And you've talked to us about how you had a sort of a circuitous route into journalism. You, like Christine Stewart, same thing. Yeah. You may not have. What advice do you have for people here who may want to get into the world of journalism? It's not very easy anymore.
It's not easy. There's a lot of debate around.
Was it Barbara Frum that walked in and said, "I want to be on camera person"?
Is that right?
I think so.
That's one of those Kevin O'Leary got on TV
Kevin
too.
Oh gosh.
I mean, it is tough. What I would say is there are two ways into journalism, of course. One is you go to journalism school and you create connections. And through those schools, there are a lot of placements, including internships. It's a point of some debate about whether unpaid internships is a form of slavery. CBC has an unpaid internship program.
I think CTV does.
Many of them do.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that I had a team of 6 producers on the Exchange, and all but one had come through that program, which for me is actually an argument to pay them, because we're obviously using it as a long job interview. But it was super valuable for them. It was a 3-month investment in their future, and most of them got hired. So understand if you're going to take a risk like that, understanding what the possible payoff is important. But sometimes those risks are worth doing. Other people will say that's absolutely untrue. You should always be paid. If you want to be a journalist, the other way in, though, is not journalism school. It's to go study some field and be an expert in that. And frankly, if you want to be in journalism, and you at all have any interest in business, it is hugely important. It's hugely understaffed. And if you're interested and can study, and you don't have to be, you can go take the Canadian Securities course. You don't have to be an MBA to be valuable. That is one field. And by the way, business journalists don't work weekends. We don't work at midnight. It's a very family-friendly kind of part of the business too, and it's not going anywhere. People need to understand the economy and their investments, and so that's actually when I talk to young journalism students, I'm like, if you like business at all, if you could persuade yourself to be passionate, you have to be passionate about it. But if you can persuade yourself to be passionate about it, do it.
Did you do the securities course?
I did.
Was it tough?
It wasn't tough. No. It's funny because I was hired, luckily, by the Financial Post as my first real job, and they made everybody do the securities course. And I was writing an investment column, like it was just this column that they had, and I was able to, as I was studying, write about what I was studying. So I got kind of lucky. So I was studying options, and I would write columns about options, which really embeds it in your brain. So that was just sort of dumb luck, but it's a great course. The Canadian Securities course is a survey of economics and business and investing. There's a section on bonds that I hope never to see again.
Oh, that formula, you have to memorize it for the exam. I had to do that for the MBA exam as well.
Bond pricing.
Oh, bond pricing.
But other than that, it's really, really good.
How do you price a bond? How do you price a share? So I always tell people interested in getting into politics, anyone interested in running for office one day, I always tell them to become subject experts too. Then you have something to bring to the table, something to argue about, something you're passionate about, whether it's healthcare or the environment. So when you get elected, you've got that little niche that you can talk about, and people go to you to say, well, you're the guy in that field, you're the woman in healthcare, what do you think about how should we reform the system? Is that how it works in journalism?
I think that's great advice, And I mean, honestly, you can learn a lot about what you need to know to be a journalist from doing it. And you can't learn to be an expert in sports or an expert in business. You sort of have to do that on your own time.
And you'd have to have great research skills, I'd say,
yes,
to be a journalist.
You have to want to learn.
And ask the right questions.
And you have to want to know people's stories.
Yeah.
Curiosity is, I should have said this. One of the other benefits in my career, which is, I can't even overestimate how important it is.
Underestimate.
I've got bond pricing in my head. I was always ignorant. I trained as an architect so that when I became a journalist, I was ignorant. I didn't know anything. And that was such a gift because I never felt like I should. There was no question I felt stupid to ask because I'm an architect. How on earth would I know this? And then I started being a business journalist and I didn't know anything. And so again, no question too stupid. My first real beat at the Financial Post was tech, and it was 1997. Nobody knew anything. BlackBerry was a pager company. And so I could go and ask these ridiculously moronic questions of these tech CEOs because I didn't feel stupid being ignorant. And it's been such a gift because as a journalist in general, but as a human being, it's kind of nice not to try to ask smart questions. It's nice to just ask the question you want to ask.
And that was the infancy of the internet. Just started, right?
Yep.
So tell us, what was your favorite interview?
So I have kind of a weird answer to that because I've been asked that a lot over time. And I've interviewed a lot of amazing people and people that just a weird answer is recently I interviewed Ted Danson. And it was such a good interview because...
It's the Cheers guy.
The Cheers guy. You guys don't know what Cheers is.
They don't know Cheers.
Anyway, he's an actor. And he was there talking about the reason it was a good interview is he was completely focused and engaged, and I was completely focused and engaged, and so it was this great conversation. You know, where sometimes you have that with people where you're just both...
Connect.
My favorite interview of all time was a Sudanese man who wrote a book. It's called The Translator, and his story is extraordinary, and the quality of humility he displayed. So he was a lost boy, or a child warrior, got to Khartoum, was leaving when he was 18 or 19, and went back in and to act as a translator for journalists, BBC crews, Reuters. So a lot of his stuff was caught on film and documented. And his book opens with a line, you know how irritating it is when you can't get cell service? And the story he's telling is being with a BBC crew, and they've been stopped at a roadside by some guerrillas, and the commander of this group has an AK-47 to his temple, and this guy has one shot at getting his boss on the sat phone. And if he can't get him on, he's got one shot, he knows the number, he will die. Anyway, so humble. I loved that. I loved meeting him.
And which one was the most disappointing? The person you had a lot of high expectations and they didn't deliver?
Moses Znaimer.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Because he wasn't humble?
He, you don't know who that is either, do you? He was a pioneer in media. He created City TV.
City TV.
Which was it was a very pioneering genre
And
at
now
the time.
Zoomer.
And Zoomer. He's a great entrepreneur. He came to my set and he intended to be rude. And he was.
Oh.
He was very rude. And if I had been prepared for that, or even maybe just a little older, I don't know, I would have been rude back. I would have been tough. But as it was, I just felt like, wow, why are you being so mean? And I was sort of on my back foot the whole time, and it was just, I've redone that interview in my head, so I'll give you an example. He was part of a pot company, a hemp company that went public.
I remember that, yeah.
So we're sitting on the set, it's live TV at this point, and O'Leary's there, and O'Leary said some dumbass things during the interview too. The whole thing was bad. And Znaimer can see my intro for him in the prompter, because it's right there, and it says something goofy like, Moses Znaimer wants you to do pot or something. And he says, 8 seconds to air. If you read that, I'm walking off. So I have to improvise. I'm like, whoa. If I had to do it over again, which I have in my dreams, I would have said, suit yourself.
Walk off.
Walk off on live TV. You will look like an Egypt.
All right, so who exceeded your expectations?
So many people, I have to say. There are people out there who, I've literally interviewed people who might be close to curing cancer. There are people in business, and you think, oh, people in business. These are the people who make things happen in our world. Young entrepreneurs, when I'm in Silicon Valley and you're with groups that are sort of just right in the fringe of stuff, again, like the blockchain, there's stuff going on it just blows me away. So many people in the business world who just are on fire. Love it.
So these young people are looking for jobs in growing sectors. So here in Mississauga, we focus on 4 sectors, whether it's life sciences, advanced manufacturing, ICT, and then something we call FIRE, which isn't FIRE, it's finance, insurance, and real estate. And those are the sectors we focus on when I look for FDI, foreign direct investment. But they want to know from you what sectors are growing, where there's opportunity, and what are the jobs of tomorrow.
So I think actually those 4 sectors you've nailed it in terms of kind of where there's potential for growth.
Right.
And also potential for anybody who's entrepreneurial and who actually wants to really create new things. ICT, obviously advanced manufacturing. Advanced manufacturing is, we've got our hopes pinned on it, right? Mm-hmm. Because Canada can and should be great at this. We have to be better, we should own it, and it plays right into our export strength. I think all of those are great. I mean, to me, the advice I would give is, of those fields, be ready to change your direction. Be ready to adapt, because what you think you're setting out to do, it may not actually be the course that you can stay on. As we all know, people who are graduating now are going to have many, many more jobs than people my age. I think that an average of something like 12 or something. I mean, some phenomenal amount of job change is going to go on. But we also know, and this is where I get excited, is a lot of the industry, so we think about finance, big banks. You might think, oh, I'm going to go work for a big bank. Go work for a big bank, for sure. Great, that's fine. But you're probably going to wind up working for a fintech. You're probably going to wind up working on something that hasn't been invented yet. Maybe you'll invent it, that actually takes the blockchain and makes it ubiquitous. I don't know. But if you're not open to that, to the idea that this is not your dad's career path, or your dad's, adaptability is, to me, the single most important thing. And then those are the sectors. I mean, I think those are all the sectors. Health sciences, ICT, that's...
So does it matter what sort of training they get, whether it's at a college, a university, they do an apprenticeship? Does it matter what field it's in?
So I think 2 things. Of course it does. If you want to be, obviously, if you want to be a biochemist, you probably have to take Latin. I think everybody should know how to code. And I think everybody should know the Socratic method. I think much more important than formal training, unless you need it to get the job you want. If you want to be a lawyer, you're still going to have to get a law degree. But you might want to get a law degree and not be a lawyer, because it's a wonderful way of thinking. It's a really good way of working through problems. It's all divergent thinking, divergent, convergent. So training is important when you want specific things, but I do think the way that you think is going to be way more important.
So can you code?
No.
I can't code either. I want
But
to know.
I'm also
Who can code?
Who can code here?
Who can code? Let's see it. No, I want to see. How many can code? I only see 2 hands. There's only 2 of you?
So
Microsoft does a program for women who code. They want all girls to learn how to code.
Well, in Minecraft, the guy that invented Minecraft, my son is 10 and obsessed with Minecraft, which is it's kind of rudimentary coding, and they've actually created I don't know, an add-on, whatever it's called, that teaches coding. My kid's 10, so it may be too late for him. I'm very frustrated they don't teach them coding now the way they teach them math. Hopefully, I think by the time his kid's in school, it will be something everybody has to learn. Again, not necessarily because you're going to be a coder, but because you need to understand
it.
The process of building things.
I have to say, I'm surprised that there are only 2 people in the room who know how to code. Is there anyone who's interested in going to learn how to code? Okay, now I feel better.
I was about to say, it's because people that know how to code don't need to look for work. Not right now.
All right, I can see there are some hands going up with people who want to ask questions. So I'll ask you one more, and then how are we going to do this? We need to line up. So while you're answering this one, we get people to line up. Ashley, how are we going to do this? They're going to line up? 2 microphones? Why don't we have people line up here, and we'll alternate. Last question. So what's Kevin O'Leary really like?
He is just as he appears. It's not really an act. He really does think that stuff. God bless him.
And do people think he's the Donald Trump of Canada? Is he really going to run for the leadership, and does he have any hope?
I don't think he's really going to run. Having said that, people have been ego massaged into running before, and that's probably going on right now.
That could very well happen.
So who knows? Yeah, I should probably not say more than that, in case he does run.
Okay, so I see some hands going up. We've got one up here. I thought we would just line up, but if you want to pass the microphone around, we can do that too. So please can you stand up and identify yourself, who you are and where you go to school or what you do, and then ask your question. Good evening.
Okay, sorry, it's so loud. I'm Stacey Ann Sterling, and I am a Mississauga resident, and I have 2 young people here today. So I'm just the chaperone or the car driver. But I do mentor young people. I have them come to my home, and I spend the expenses to get them to come, and I have guest speakers come into my home to mentor the young people. 2 years ago, because I recognized that coding would be the way for the young people to go for the future, so I looked around Mississauga for that class, and there was none. And I had to drive 2 young people all the way to Don Mills in Toronto for coding, and it was $1,000 each child.
Wow.
And even now, I don't know if there's going to be anything in Mississauga going forward or starting in our schools, because we have recognized that it's really important. I did find out this year that there's some things in Oakville, but yet not in Mississauga.
I don't know the answer to that. I know that we toured Microsoft, and they had a program where they were teaching, girls, youth, to code. I would touch base with them, and maybe they have the answer to that. Any of my staff know about coding and where people can learn to code? No? We can look into it. Try to. Does someone know the answer to that? Okay, yes, ma'am. Well, stand up. Tell us your name. Tell us what you know.
My name's Sid, and something that my school does, that the whole school does.
What school are you at, please?
I'm at Millennium American
Okay.
School in Mississauga. Anyway, something that our whole school does is a week of code, where you do a bunch of different fun games, kind of learning how to code. And then, there's different blocks that you put together to make, a game or something.
Right.
And then you click a button or something along those lines, and it shows you what you've actually done and how many hours of code you've done.
So, Sid, do you think that it's in the high schools that people are learning, kids are learning how to code? Or in college, or?
Yeah, you just have to bring it up.
You just have to bring it up.
Or you can do it at home, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And some schools, it's robotics, but it's...
But we have a big robotics program here in Mississauga.
There's coding embedded in robotics, right? It's all...
Anyone go to Rick Hansen? It's a great program, robotics program. Were you involved in the robotics program there? The champion is right here, Councillor Ron Starr. He assists with the robotics program over there, and it's just a great school, and they're very competitive. We always win, right? Right, Ron? Rick Hansen, world champion robotics school.
World champion.
All right, next question. And there's somebody behind you, Sumita, up on the back too. We'll go on this side and then we'll alter. Okay, well, he's already got the microphone. Ammon, find your person.
Hi, my name is Jonathan. I go to Guelph. I had a question about the Comer case against the Bank of Canada. I feel like it's an important topic that isn't discussed very much in the news, and if you could speak more on that.
Is this the Rocco Galati case?
Yeah.
So it's super complicated. This is a case, Rocco Galati is an activist lawyer who's bringing a case against the Bank of Canada, arguing that it is not fulfilling its original mandate, which was to lend interest-free to the provinces. It's wending its way through. What I was told by finance is even if he wins, the finance department isn't, and the bank aren't really duty-bound to do anything with it. So it's an interesting kind of argument, but I don't know that it'll have any actual, unless, I guess, public opinion there's a groundswell. The idea is that we, at some point, instead of just printing money and creating it ourselves, we began borrowing on the open markets. And so the debts and deficits that we carry are funded by foreigners, and we pay interest on it. And the point that this case is trying to make is that the original mandate of the bank was to avoid the public debt markets and just issue debt yourself. And that we could be doing that right now. We could make as much debt as we wanted, and we wouldn't be paying interest to foreigners, it's an interesting argument, but I don't know what's going to happen. I will say, Rocco Galati is, if you just sort of Google this guy, it's really easy. And this case, I interviewed him. I did a big long interview with him about this. Because you first look at it and you go, this looks like a crackpot thing. Like it looks like some kind of weird, what's going on here? And then you look more closely at his career, and he's done a bunch of crackpot things that ends up changing law in meaningful ways. So he's kind of an interesting guy, which is why I thought it was worth looking at and worth watching for sure.
Like Ackerman. Okay, we have a question on this side. Ammon?
Hi. My name is Samina Khalik, and I'm a grade 11 student. So I have two questions which I couldn't really choose from for you to answer. So one of them is, so you're doing something you love, but do you ever find moments where you're just not loving it, but it's not forever not loving it, but just at that moment, and how do you get through that?
Do you want to ask the second question too?
Okay. So the second question is, sometimes we see successful people, or however we deem them successful, we see they're untouchable, even though we know their stories and they've been through so much and they've been through so many hardships. But then we see, no, I still can't do that. We know that we're gonna have to go through a lot of failures to be successful, but still, even knowing these stories, we're like, no, I can't do that. They've been through so much, but still, I don't think I can still be successful, even though these people that we deem unsuccessful have been through so much to get to where they are.
I love that question. I think that's hugely important. On the first, of course, no matter how much you love your job, I'm writing a book. I love, love, love doing this. And there are days I sit down at the computer and go, what am I doing? And the answer is, if you love it enough, those moments, it's like your kid, right? You want to strangle him, but you do remember that you adore them. And it gets you past that moment. On the second, you're raising something profound, because the people that have great success are people that at some point or other in their life, if they're lucky when they were little, internalize the message that they could do it. And you see people have great breakthroughs, right? They run a marathon, and it changes their perspective because they think, I never would have guessed I could do X, and I just did it. So what else might I do? And it's something we give ourselves. It's not actually something we get externally. And the really successful people who have failed, there's something in them that they're just confident that they are able to achieve what they want to achieve, even if it's not exactly the way they thought it was going to look. It's an internal guide. It's really important.
I think success is really rising above adversity, right? It's conquering something. And on your first question, I think those of us who love what we do, keep that in perspective, that you have good days and bad, but on the whole, I love what I do too. I think I keep in perspective that I want to make a difference in people's lives, and that's what keeps me going, even though there are ups and downs, right? All right, you have another question over here, Samita.
My name is Gary Verley. I'm a citizen of Mississauga. I have two questions, one for Amanda, one for the mayor. The first question to the mayor is regarding any future plans or projects in setting up spaces such as incubators in tech. I just feel that the proximity of the city, especially to the KW region, is quite of an advantage. And I think to Amanda, my question is the importance of diversifying our economy, especially in tech. I think we have a huge talent pool, and I think we should do a better job at it. We have all these companies recruiting, students out of Waterloo into the United States. Now they're setting up shop here. Can we do more things, in that extent? I think as someone who's trying to transition my career into that, I think that's really, really important. So that was sort of my question regarding that area.
They're both
Thank you.
great questions. Thank you. So from my perspective, I'm really trying to shift Mississauga to be that hub of innovation and entrepreneurship. And we've created a task force out of the mayor's office to really drive that agenda. In fact, the two councillors sit on the task force, and we bring together great minds to see how we move that innovation agenda forward. Certainly at UTM, there's the iCube, and they've got the Institute of Management and Innovation. We do have the RIC Center here, Research and Information Commercialization Center here. So we are trying to move that envelope. Yes, we're looking for an accelerator. Yes, we're looking for an incubator. Councillor Jim Tovey he's designing a whole new community on the waterfront called Lakeview, and he's got an innovation corridor mapped out right down there, and he's definitely looking for an institution of higher learning, whether it be post-secondary or a research center, and also an incubator, an accelerator. I think he's flexible, but certainly we are looking for those opportunities in our city, and we'll have to collaborate to get there. Because often those interesting warehouse spaces is where you set up those incubators, those accelerators, and unfortunately, we're such a new city. We're only 41 years old, Amanda. So we don't have that old, interesting space. So we're trying to carve it out of new space or warehouse, factory, but it's coming. It's coming. It's on our horizon. It's on our radar. We all want it, so we're moving towards it.
And I think those kinds of initiatives are so important. And we know right now, the challenge that we face is, the structural challenge we face is that the stuff that we're good at, and let's just say, for example, oil, we've got a vast resource here that we've benefited from. And even if oil goes back to 100, we're moving to a post-oil world. So we do know at some point that we're going to have to do something else. And this is where, I am of the view generally, when people say, what can governments do to help? My kind of broad answer is get out of the way, right? Because governments, the cliche is they can't pick winners. But what governments can do, industrial policy is a real thing, and history has shown that governments do that better than even the private sector, which doesn't mean, in my view, that's not an argument for putting tax dollars directly into a company. It's an argument for creating an environment. Things like incubators. And one example of how powerful this kind of stuff can be is OMERS, which is the big pension fund. As you may know, a few years ago, hived off a portion of it to invest in venture cap. It's small relative to OMERS pension fund, but this has made, it's been about 10 years, and since I've been watching it, our VC community is flourishing in a new way because there's suddenly money available, and the knock-on effect of that is enormous. And so we now there were $5 billion companies in Canada last year, and you've probably only heard of Shopify. The other 4 you've never heard of. And that's great. And we could actually encourage, we could encourage CPP to do this. Governments could actually use kind of suasion to get some of that capital moving. Not tell it where to go, but just tell it to invest. These are ideas that people, I think, are grabbing onto. And we do have a bit of a burning platform, which is always a good thing. It makes people change.
What we did, it was really interesting. We did here last year, we had an angel investor networking night. So we matched startups with angel investors, and it was really successful. And we've been asked to do that again this year. So I know my staff is working on that. But it was great. Yeah. We have a question up here, Emin.
Hi. My name is Ida Jaja, and I'm a student at U of T. I was wondering if you could give yourself some advice to your 20-year-old self. What would it be?
Your 20-year-old self.
To your 20-year-old self.
Quit smoking sooner?
I think for me, I always wanted to go to law school. And when it came down to it, my husband and I both did postgraduate degrees. He did his first, and he did his at Harvard. He has a Harvard MBA. And so when it came time for me to go back and do that postgrad degree, I didn't want to go back to law school because I thought it took too long.
Yeah.
It took too long. I was already an adult, so I thought I'll go do an MBA. and it's quicker, and I'm already in the business world. And so I had a 20-year business career before I came into politics. So maybe if I had to do it over again, I'd go into law school right out of undergrad and not wait. There are a couple of people, so...
Yes, my name is Ariel.
Amen? Somebody here too? And there, okay.
In the last decade, there's been a phenomenon of shifting balance in workforce participation between age groups, and this shift has been going in the direction of the age group between 50 and 65 and over 65 over the between 15 and 30. Have you looked?
Seen this?
Have you looked at this? At these numbers? They come from the Human Resources Management Association, the ones that I've looked at, but there are also other sources.
I think we've seen it anecdotally as well. I think when you see this new crop of even federal members of parliament, they're all very young. Yeah. This time and the last time, very young. Yeah. Some of them very professional, but very young. And when you look at the recession of 2009, you saw a real a contraction in industry, and you had a lot of those senior management jobs eliminated. And it was men that were most affected in that recession. Yep. And what happened was they were willing to take any job, and they took some of the starter entry-level jobs, and those dried up for the students. And I think we're still seeing the effects, the post-effects of the 2009 recession from my perspective.
I also think just demographically, we are living longer. And just in terms of how we're going to support ourselves into old age, we will work longer. And the other end of that is, it's not unreasonable. You know, when I was 18, the expectation was that I would get out of the house, and that I would get student loans and get jobs, and that was it. And today, an 18-year-old is young because they haven't had the opportunity to have the summer jobs, and so we're kind of pushing things out. I think that the moment of kind of truth and reality is more like 25. For young people, and we got to adjust our thinking a little. I mean, I certainly look at my son, and I don't think at 18 he's going to be on his own.
They don't meet those same benchmarks that we did. I mean, I was married at 24. I had my first job at 23, and then our youth today, it's later.
Yeah, everything's kind of moving later.
Out. All right, I know there's a lot of hands up, so we'll try and make our answers shorter. There's a couple here. I see some over here. Okay.
I'm Abby.
Welcome, Abby.
I go to Mississauga Secondary, and I'm currently in grade 11. And I wanted to go into journalism, but I'm a really nervous person. And I was just wondering if you had any tips or experiences that helped you work through that at all?
I am one of the shyest people you're ever going to meet. And really a classic introvert. And before I became a journalist, and what I mean by that is, I get my energy from being alone. But also there would be a voice in my head, so small talk, I'd be like, well, that's stupid. So I didn't have any small talk. I didn't know how to do it. And journalism is the best gift for the shy, because you're handed this tool set of ask other people about themselves. And guess what? That's interesting, because most people have something to say. And then you're not talking about you at all. So I wouldn't even think about it. Go learn the tools, and it's actually, even if you don't stay a journalist, it's probably good training for you to come out of it a little bit.
Exactly. Samita, you got somebody up here? Hello, welcome.
Hello, my name's Sam. This generation, I'm a grade 12 student. Our current generation is expected to handle all the future problems of this country, the economy, etc. Now, do you think there's anything this generation needs to change to better handle the future problems in this country? Thank you.
It's funny, my 10-year-old said to me not long ago, why did I have to be alive when everything bad is happening? And he was referring to climate change. And I said, you know what, honey, people have felt that way before. It always feels like the end of the world, and somehow it isn't. I think actually politically it's going to be one of the big ways. We need some real innovation around how we can get long-term thinking back into politics.
Well, democratic reform. Yeah. We're looking at that now in Parliament. But long-term thinking would be great, because when I look at my own infrastructure projects, anything I want is going to take 10 years just to get ready. Right. And I was told by the politicians, well, that's a two and a half election cycles. I might not be around then. So it's not in their interest. Short-term thinking.
Right.
What's shovel-ready in the ground? Let's get it done. Point to it. We did that, right?
Yeah.
We need that long-term thinking to build those big legacy projects. I saw some over here. Who's next? Aman, do you have somebody? And Samita, you have somebody here too? Okay. You have a few?
Hi, my name is Latish. I'm the coordinator for PEA, which stands for Peel Environmental Youth Alliance, which is a project by EcoSource. And Robert's here, the father of our director. And my question to Amanda is, how can pursuing sustainability, how can you justify that to a capitalist?
Well, I feel like the counselor should get up and answer this. The mayor mentioned this, and now I'm going to start talking about something I don't know anything about, which is a professional hazard. But there is this new housing project, this whole development, lakeside development. And when I was speaking to the counselor who's been spearheading it for 10 years?
Oh, yes.
10 years, pre-public life.
That's right.
He made the point, and it's a profound one, that if you think about sustainability in terms that don't include being financially sustainable, in other words, it has to actually work on the dollars and cents side too, then you're missing the point. And so I think businesses get that. I think increasingly governments get that. It's funny, a couple of years ago, companies added sustainability initiatives to up engagement and stuff. And they've discovered now that their employees, people your age, that's not additive. They expect that. Yep. That's like, we won't poison you with the drinking water. So it's just become kind of what has to get done.
Great, thank you. Over here.
Hi, I'm Naveed. I am a third-year U of T student, and I'm an international student as well. I also work as at UTM as vice president external at the student union. My question is, for international students, what can the government do locally as well as federally to help them set up shops with the Canadian partners and make sure that we see a good globalized and diverse Canada?
So globalization, diversity, I don't know I got all your questions. So you want us to diversify as a nation, to trade abroad? Is that what was your question? Or?
Yeah, to set up, to help international students, and the alumni who come out, and to help them set up maybe jobs, or help them to get jobs and set up their businesses in Canada.
We have a very robust foreign students program here, whether at UTM or at Sheridan College. So maybe some of our students here tonight are foreign students then that would love to be assistants to set up businesses. I think some of our domestic ones would as well, of course.
I mean, I think we could do a lot more on immigration for foreign students. I think you could get automatic residency status to somebody who came here for 4 years, and we'd benefit enormously from that.
I know your home countries want you to go back and bring all that knowledge with you. We want to keep you here so you can apply it here.
Right.
You got somebody next to you, Samita, as well. Do you want to get this corner done? Because I see a pocket up here that's been waiting for a little while. You've got one up there? Okay.
Hi, good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Amanda.
Good evening.
My name is Jeff. I work as an entrepreneur for World Financial Group, and I'm a youth worker and an interpreter for Newcomer Center of Peel. Thank you again for coming over and doing the speech and having this youth seminar. It's very important for our new generation. My question is, I have a particular youth, I'm not going to mention the name. He has been born and raised here in Canada. He's of Spanish background, and he was wondering what type of workshop there is for youth who have, let's say, learning disabilities or any type of disability, but who have skills and trades and acquirements through careers and through extra courses. Mm-hmm. If there's any type of workshop that can help them to be put in a job where they can get paid, and as well the manager can also get paid. Because like I said, some of the youth, their barriers that they face right now is they're doing lots of volunteer work and they're doing so many courses, but they have a learning disability, and really some of them, they can't find a stable job. Yep, right. So I'm just wondering if there's any type of workshop or anything that can be created so that even a normal youth can, when you look at the resume and the skills and the traits that they have on the paper, they can match
There are
them
definitely
with the jobs.
programs.
Right.
Former Lieutenant Governor David Onley was a huge advocate. He himself had a disability and did a vast amount of research. And I think actually I think there are pilot programs. One thing they've found, interestingly, with people with disabilities is they're better employees. Their engagement level is much higher. And so the payoff of hiring somebody with a disability is very high. And the other interesting thing is people with disabilities injure themselves less.
That's right.
Because they don't take dumb chances, the way people who feel able-bodied do. So I can't give you a specific program, but I know if you do a little research, I think you'll find that there are these incentive programs for hiring and probably for youth too. I would think probably.
All right. If you want to ask a question, put up your hand. I'm going to do something different. I know, they're coming out next. So you're number 1, you're number 2, right? 3, 4, 5. Remember your number. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 6. Got your number? Michael, you're 7, 8, 9. Okay, you 2 have asked already. Wait, I have to go to first time before we go second time. Okay, you stand up and give them the response.
Well, I'm Stacy, and my day job is as a teacher for young people with disabilities.
Oh.
Transitioning to work. So I could be
Do you have a card, Stacy?
market and common services, ODHD, and more.
Perfect.
Brilliant. Okay, where did I end up? 8? Who's 8? 8. You're 8? I saw 9 and 10. Okay, we'll see how we get to after that. You remember your numbers? I'm going to call them out. 1.
Hello, this question is to both of you. First of all, my name is Devra Maharaj. I'm a resident in Mississauga. I'm 16 years old. And it's regarding sort of political will in this country, because I was researching some of the biggest infrastructure projects in the world, and right now they're HS2 in England, 78 billion pounds, and there's a Three Gorges Dam in China, $40 billion. Then also there's a Shuo Shinkansen in Japan. I think it's close to like $100 billion equivalent. And then when you look at North America, the biggest thing is like a tunnel going from, I don't know, like a bridge or some train or something like that. Very petty things.
Yeah.
And then, so my real question is that all these different countries, so Europe and Asia, are developing on fronts of technology that North America hasn't even scratched as yet, like maglev and high-speed rail. So do you think that there is a political will in this country for a short-term and long-term plan of these different infrastructures? And if you do not think that there is a current political will to get it done now, do you think that maybe it's developing?
I think the answer is yes. I see from the federal government a real motivation towards these large infrastructure projects, which we've been hearing billions of dollars that they're willing to commit to large infrastructure projects. Even on a provincial level, I mean, we got our light rail transit paid for by the provincial government with worth $1.2 billion. So I have hope. I don't know about you, Amanda.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say is small and distributed can actually be very meaningful, right? If you're reaching more people, that actually can change people's lives. It may feel like a small thing to improve a highway, but if it means people's commute drops by half an hour and you're talking about 2 million of those people, that's important.
That's significant. Number 2.
Hello, my name is Callan Atoa, and I recently graduated from a degree of broadcast journalism. I'm really passionate about journalism and love storytelling. My question is to you, Amanda, is how has the media landscape changed since when you started out to now, and what should future journalists like myself adapt to the changes?
Oh, excellent questions.
Yeah, the questions are getting harder as we go along. I've noticed that. Number 8, I've got my eye on you. It's changed. I mean, obviously, the model of media delivery is broken. The advertising model, which is how we funded our activities, is broken, and the transition to digital didn't work. Because when we first went digital, we said, well, you can have this for free, and now we want to go back to those same advertisers and say, well, actually, we still need you to be paying for this stuff. Consumers are used to not paying for anything because advertisers paid for it. And so now we're going to consumers and saying, well, we wish you would pay something because we can't afford to hire all these people. At the moment, we haven't figured this out. So you're seeing, I mean, today the Telegraph said it was cutting 20% of its workforce. Roger said it was cutting 4% of its workforce.
The Post.
The Post is, I mean, this is a shrinking pie. I'm confident that news gathering will continue because a functioning democracy needs news gathering, and it needs to be good and credible, and it's still time-consuming and expensive. So we're going to have to figure it out. So I would say, by all means, go to a traditional organization. I would look to the ones that have some chance at adapting. Not all of them will adapt. So, you know, I would say, you know, HuffPost over old school newspaper, maybe. But I think many of the old school names will also figure this out.
Thank you. Number 3.
Hi, my name is Nicole. My question is about entry-level jobs. I just finished my degree at UTM last month. I'm looking for my first real-time gig, and I have quite a number of friends who are unemployed looking for their first job, and there's just simply not enough entry-level jobs out there. They're looking for jobs for people with experience of a 40-year-old. So my question is, how can we solve this problem?
How do you get that first job?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously one of the toughest problems to solve. That's why people make sacrifices like do internships and right, they try to get the experience some other way. If you have a skill you can offer to get you in the door, so literally I could type, so I got in the door. If there's some way in that's maybe not the job you want to wind up in, but gets you into the place where that job exists, that's one way to go to begin to build your experience and your resume. It is hard. There's no question about it. I mean, there is a bit of a chicken and egg problem with that.
Absolutely. Number 4. My name is Alan.
Hi, my name is Alan. I've been in the insurance industry for about 7 years. I was just recently let go a couple months ago. So I'm in between of a bit of career transition. I still want to get into insurance. I still have this mindset of like analyzing risk and just like assessing how insurance affects like everyday lives and companies, businesses, that sort of thing. But there's a part of me that's kind of telling me you maybe should try some other career. And I don't know what other sort of career paths I could explore with the skill sets I've been in insurance, because it's sort of tough after being 7 years. It's kind of hard to like transition, right? So I'm just wondering, should I stay in insurance or should I try to find some other career? And if so, like, what would you suggest?
I'm not going to pretend to be able to answer that because you'll come haunt me later. But if you mentioned risk analytics, which is something the world needs more of, not less, and every financial institution needs it. So if that's what you like, I would go to a headhunter that deals with all of them.
Right.
And maybe it's a bank that you should be at. But plenty of companies also need people who understand risk analysis. So if that's the part of it that you like, I would absolutely broaden your search.
Especially with a bank, eh?
Yeah.
Or even a career coach. They can open your eyes and your doors to different things. Number 5. Thank you.
All right. Good evening. Thank you so much for your speech. I really got a lot from it. So my question is for Amanda. During your speech, you talked about actually, my name is Edie. I'm the president of the Students' Union at UTM. My question is that you talked a lot about curiosity and embracing ambiguity, right? In life, we have to make a lot of decisions that end up changing the course of our lives every single day. So what advice could you give to youth in this room and people who are graduating or people who are still in school that could help them make those decisions easier, or is something that could help them make those decisions that shape their lives for the rest of their lives?
So this is something I've actually been working on and spending a lot of time thinking about, and it should be answered in my next book.
So wait till the fall and buy the book.
but the answer is, most of us find change and enacting change uncomfortable, because we like what we know. There's a whole bunch. There's neuroscientific reasons for it. There's social psychology. There's just human nature. The people that I've met who are good at this, it's not just that they've learned to overcome the distaste of it, they actually learn to like it. So it's a little bit like any activity that is unpleasant at first, and you break through to some place where it feels good now. Change is going to be so constant for young people that I would say any discomfort you feel, you use really concrete steps. Why am I doing this? How am I feeling about it? Was that the right course of action? Did I ask the right questions? Circle back to the original problem, all the stuff that you do with complex problems. And I think it's a skill set that will stay with you.
This is number 6.
Perfect. And sorry, who was number 7, just so we know?
Ms. Michael. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Christopher. I'm a queer advocate, and I'm known for suing my school.
Or were you at St. Joe's?
It's the Conseil scolaire du District Catholique Centre-Sud. It's French Catholic Central South District School Board. But I would like to ask you, I've engaged with the press quite a bit, and I would like to know, for someone who has faced so much adversity, how do I engage in a way that will allow me to both educate and have a meaningful conversation with the press when they write stories like I've seen in the Globe and Mail, where they actually said that I wanted to sleep with my peers in their bed, or where you even mentioned TD, and TD froze bank accounts of trans people who were just trying to access their funds and still hasn't changed their policies. And I've engaged with the executives at that bank, and they still haven't changed anything. Or even just the state of LGBTQ rights today. They're still not moving along fast enough.
Yeah. I'm sorry for the adversity you faced, and I'm sorry if you've been badly treated in the media. I hate to say it, it's not unique to you to feel as though your story was misrepresented or facts were wrong or you were misquoted. It happens more often than you think. Not because people are out to get you, it's just because it's hard to get everything right all the time. But I think the pace of change is slow in some ways, and it probably feels very slow when you're in the middle of it. Having said that, when I was a kid, the idea that it would just be a norm, my son, doesn't even occur to him that two men can't marry.
Right.
It doesn't even, he doesn't understand it. Why anybody would suggest that. So that's pretty good. That's not, it's not glacial. So I guess hang in there is what I would say. How do you reach people? You stay calm. You stay calm and unemotional as much as you can, because people don't want to feel threatened by something that's an idea there that's foreign to them. If you can introduce it in a way that's unthreatening, you have a better chance at opening their minds.
And we have role models and champions. We have cabinet ministers and a premier who's gay. We have Caitlyn Jenner, who's opened so many doors and opened so many eyes. Yeah. That's really strident coming out that way. It's quite groundbreaking. So I think there's hope.
Yeah.
I think there's hope. It's glacial, I hear you. But I'm quite sympathetic too, so I'm very sorry for any adversity you've faced, but things are changing. Not at the pace we'd like, but they are. Number 7.
Question of Amanda. It's more a comment.
Microphone?
Feedback on the comment.
You've got a microphone?
One thing I didn't hear today is the trades. I'm seeing a trend that there's a true shortage in trades, and I think that the students, the younger people, 15 to 25, are getting caught up in, I'm white collar, so I'm not going to do that blue collar and non-collar work. And a small comment, I've actually done bigger projects with people that have been in the trades.
Yeah.
My dad, to be specific. And it's really rewarding. And I think there's a lot of money in that area. And I think we're missing that completely in Canada. That's my comment.
If that's true, then you're right. It's a big problem. I sort of assume we're kind of addressing it, because especially with the closure of some visa programs that allowed companies to bypass the whole apprenticeship and skilled training stuff, I assume there's now a better understanding that we need to, have skilled trades here. Companies need to actually own the apprenticeship part of that. And I agree, it's rewarding and lucrative. So yeah. I certainly don't mean, but I guess what I would say is, even if you're a plumber, your job is going to change in your lifetime, the way it works and how your customers want to pay. And so the complexity and stuff I'm talking about, I didn't mean to kind of bypass that group.
And listen, those are really well-paying jobs.
Great jobs.
And sometimes going into the trades, you're much more further ahead than one of youth going to university. You're waiting 4 years and then you're looking for a job. These people have been in a trade making money and progressing, in many of them own businesses.
And you can't outsource them to...
Yeah, that's right. I need a plumber right now. If anyone asks. Number 8. Number 8, there you go.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tamika Malcolm from the Boys and Girls Club of Peel, and I interact with youth, and I've been doing it for a while. I just graduated from Humber College as a child and youth worker.
I love it.
and I really have a strong passion for youth. I was really inspired by your speech, Amanda. It was very touching, especially with the part of curiosity and how a lot of our curiosity is suppressed as a child. My question is, or just feedback or a word of inspiration for youth that feel as if they have no hope, especially youth that grew up in circumstances where whether they interact with the youth justice system, or they grow up in single parent homes, or they just feel as if they're stagnant in life and they're not going anywhere in life and they're not good enough to achieve greater than people think they are.
Yeah.
So just like, how would you inspire them or encourage them and allow them to realize that they matter and they do have the ability to turn their dreams into reality?
Wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for the work you're doing, because sometimes all it takes is a responsible person in their life who believes that. I do some stuff in Toronto with a shelter for homeless kids, and it's a very rigorous one. It's not just a place where they're allowed to sleep. It's a place where they're expected to have a plan, see the doctor, either work or be in school. But the most important thing this place does for kids who are going through a whole variety of tough stuff is look them in the eye and say, we believe in you, but you got to do it. It's up to you. But here's an adult who's looking at you and saying, you can do what you want. And it is powerful, because it's sometimes the internal support's missing. Ultimately, it has to come from inside of them, but they need a little extra help.
All right, we have final 3 questions. So number 9, 10, and we add an 11. 9. I think, is this
Over
you?
here?
Right, over here. And can 10 identify yourself so we know? Right there, okay.
Hi, my name is Nanar, and this is a question to both of you.
Sure.
Speaking as a grade 11 student, I often see our generation being criticized and bombarded with negative comments about how, sometimes we're materialistic or we're impatient. And
I'm sorry,
things like
who's
that.
criticized? I'm sorry, miss?
Our generation.
Your generation.
Yeah, often by our own parents and teachers. And I would just like to know, what do you think about our generation? Do you have hope, and do you have any advice for the people, often like high schoolers, who feel discouraged of how adults think of us?
Well, it's not unique to you. I think we all felt that way.
I think that's an important point, is every generation is seen as lazy and good for nothing by the one before them. Having said that, there are huge, Gen Y and millennials,
big differences.
It's a sea change because of how you were raised and the way you think. So yes, we think, a management expert calls Generation Y bother, because they're seen as entitled and don't want to work hard. The fact is, though, the way we organize our businesses is outdated. The whole idea of a manager is outdated. And you guys, there's going to be friction as you come in, and we haven't quite gone out, but you'll win. You'll win, because the way you think and the way you operate is the right way. I have no doubt about it. It's why you guys are creating, the people that we dismiss create distributed enterprises, right? Which is the way of the world now.
Oh, I have incredible hope for this generation. I think you guys are going to knock it out of the park. Didn't Zappo just eliminate all titles?
Yeah.
That's incredible. All right, now 10 right here.
Hello, my name is Alec Wheeler, and I'm a citizen of Mississauga.
Welcome.
So I know that Richard Branson of Virgin, he's obviously a big innovator in the business world for a lot of his practices, starting up from a record company to making, Virgin. And I read a little bit last year that he started with this new pilot plan, which would have employees have unlimited sick days and unlimited days off if they wanted it to. First of all, is that true or not?
That's
okay,
true.
good, I didn't get it off CNN.
Yep.
Second of all, do you see this as being something just as a radical one-off, or is this the way that the business model is going to have to change for the future?
So I don't know what the mayor thinks about this. I think it's a colossal mistake. I think it'll wind up being terribly unfair to employees who will take fewer sick days and fewer vacation days than if it was prescribed. If somebody gives you 3 weeks vacation, you feel like you're entitled to 3 weeks, and you'll take every single day, or more in my case. If somebody says, just take what vacation you think you deserve, well, geez, what's that? How much is that? If you're a high-level, high-functioning employee, maybe you telecommute and it works for you. If you're like most people, you're going to be afraid of getting fired and that your boss is judging you and you'll take nothing. So it sounds good. I think it's bad policy. I don't think it will survive.
Yeah, it sounds like the honor system doesn't always work, too. Our employees number 5,000, so it would be very tough if everyone decided to be off at the same time. Yeah, or the same chunk of time. Yeah. This is something you can negotiate with your immediate superiors as well. They can be flexible. We're very flexible here because we have staff that work weekends, long hours, evenings, and we give credit to that. I mean, you take a day off or a few extra days off if we pull it in a lot of time, and I think most places do the same. All right, number 11's right behind you, and I think that's our final question.
Good evening.
We have one over here? All right, a 12.
Okay.
Is there a 13? Waiting patiently, there's a 12? Okay. Is there a 13? Okay, and then we're cutting it off because I know Amanda would like to go home tonight, but I'm also delighted at the number of questions and the interest, so thank you. 11, 12, 13.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amanda. I really enjoyed your keynote tonight. My name is Tina Cole. I've been around the whole youth band. This is probably my 5th and a half time being a youth in my lifetime. And I'm so glad you brought up the element of curiosity. I've always been very in touch with my true inner self, that curious part of me that's been suppressed for whatever life had presented in my lifetime. And I think what's important to understand, I have now entered my 4th career in my lifetime because I stayed in touch with that curious part of myself. Taking care of life as I needed to, but always engaging with that curious part of me. And today I am currently being a mentor, coach to great Canadian artistic talent that we have in the music industry, and trying to mentor and coach them through the process of getting from here to here. And I use my own life experiences that. For me, coming to my full circle of being who I really need to be was a process. Yeah. And if you just stay in tune with who you really are, your true inner self will at one point in your life present itself, and then you will be able to capture those opportunities for yourself. So don't give up. Just keep focused, stay focused to your finish line. You will get there, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Tina. Well said, well said. 12 is up here.
Hi, Mayor Bronny and Amanda. Thank you so much for giving us your time. My name is Ray Khan. I'm the current student director and president of the iCube, which is the business accelerator at the University of Toronto. I actually have the founder here as well, Danny. I have a very simple question that I feel that can apply to a lot of people. What would you say is the virtue and the value in taking initiative? And I don't know if you can give like one or maybe 2 examples of how taking initiative has changed, your life, or the kind of impact that you had on the community, whether local or global.
So that's a great question, and I can rephrase that as taking a risk, an initiative or a risk in your life to really put you on a different track. Sometimes it's just a matter of, Sheryl Sandberg wrote a book about it, lean in, volunteer, put your hand up, take that risk, take that initiative. So for me, I put my name on a ballot. Now that's pretty intimidating, right? Is anyone really going to vote for me? Does it work that way? And it did. That was a big risk that changed my life. I went from business person to community activist. I sat on a lot of boards, and then I entered the world of politics. And so taking that risk changed my life. And it was, and I encourage you to take the calculated risk. I mean, don't take reckless risks, but take a calculated risk in your life.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. And I think, to your point too, you can do it in ways that aren't about your job, or you can actually take the risk of signing up to volunteer for something you think you don't have time for and finding the time, or like that kind of initiative, I think is so important. And I actually think, back to the point about this generation, young people have it in spades. It's actually central to how you guys think. You want to do things.
Start a business, take that risk. Last question of the night. Eamon? Right here in front of you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lorenzo Escobar. I'm 23 years old. I graduated from university last year, and I own 2 businesses. What you've said about creativity is exactly spot on, and just digging with that further, and I know for a fact it will apply to a lot of individuals here. and also the current issue with about youth unemployment, how it's about 14%, and then definitely higher than the Canadian average of unemployment. Would you also encourage, if students are not able to find work after their school, would you encourage them in starting a business? And then that will definitely also, I guess the word I'm looking for is stimulate that creativity.
Yep.
And then also, are there any programs available to help people start their businesses?
Sure. Well, there are, and in fact, right here in the Central Library on the 4th floor is what we call MBEC, or Mississauga Business Enterprise Center. And that will help you create a business plan or create a marketing plan. It will review your plan. It'll tell you where you can access funding. The provincial government often has funding for startups, so those programs do exist. You know, it's so difficult to find work. So many of you, whether you're new immigrants, it was your parents had to start jobs, and often youth as well. They're very enterprising. Look at this young man. He started 2 businesses and he's 23 years old. Sometimes you have to start a business of your own.
Yeah, I mean, there's been this whole push towards teaching entrepreneurship in recent years, which on the one hand I'm a fan of because it makes business more accessible to people and helps us generally know how good it is. And on the other hand, not everyone's an entrepreneur. You know, I'm not. I'm happy to work for somebody else. So to me, you've got to know yourself. If you have it in you, by all means, it's very gratifying.
You
tell us,
right?
You could evangelize. It's so gratifying to want something and see if you can do it. And even if you can't do it, the effort was, there's a lot in there that some people really, and I think more people will work for themselves than ever before, right?
So this has been a fantastic evening. I want to thank you all for coming out. I want to talk. Just before we wrap up, I don't know about you, but I learned a lot tonight. I learned a lot about staying curious, about knowingness, about accepting ambiguity, about divergent thinking, about paradigm shift there, about being humble and having humility, not to feel gloom. I'm very optimistic. I have a lot of hope with this generation. And I learned about matching people and their skills. So I want you to join me in thanking Amanda for coming all the way out to Mississauga tonight to join us. We have some flowers for Amanda.
Thank you.
Oh, our pleasure.